I was feeling a bit of self-induced pressure making this box, but not because I was on a timeline or it was a paid commission. This was a very special gift for a good friend to put her husband's ashes in, so the pressure was on to make the best box I've made and to not screw anything up, because I only had enough of this old reclaimed hardwood to make the box. This was a very old timber headboard, some kind of oak I think. I cut the board down to the 4 sides I needed, making sure to keep the grain continuous from one side, across the front and around to the other side. I wasn't able to get a match on the back panel, but as this was going to be a hinged lid box, the back will rarely be on display. I then took the pieces over to the second table saw and cut the miters with a small, sharp, thin curved blade. I find I get much better results with this blade for long miters. My initial design thoughts for the box was to have integrated feet at the corners, so the sides were left much higher than I needed, but I soon changed my mind on that, and you can see here where I've drawn out my idea for those feet, as I cut the sides down to final size. This was some very dense hardwood, and I don't have a ripping blade for this saw. I noticed the blade was starting to struggle to cut the wood, and I was getting a lot of burning, but I didn't notice the smoke that was being generated. That's when my neighbour came over and told me my dust collector, which is outside, was on fire because there was smoke blowing out of it. It wasn't actually on fire, it was just exhausting the smoke from the saw. Crisis averted, I finished cutting the last board and promptly ordered a new blade for the saw. I needed to cut a rebate along one edge of each of the side pieces for the base to fit into, and I find the best way to do that is on the table saw, but the only flat grind blade I have fits the second saw, so I use that to cut the rebate, using several passes, moving the fence closer to the blade each time. I obviously couldn't get the fence right up to the blade, so the very thin slither that was left was just removed with a chisel and sanded. I could have used a sacrificial board on the fence, but hey, I chose not to. It was time to glue up the sides, so I stretched some masking tape across the joints using a straight edge to keep them aligned. And then used way too much glue. Apparently woodworkers use too much glue. Well, we probably do, but it's better than a dry joint, right? I clamped it up, made sure it was square and left it for a few hours to dry. I came back later that night to take it out of the clamps and hopefully admire some really nice tight miters. The use of tape on the inside of the box to tame the glue squeeze out is definitely worth the little extra time it takes to do. I wanted to add splines to the box, not only to strengthen the miters, but to also dress it up a bit. I used the flat grind blade in the second saw again to cut the slots, and this old spline jig, which was made to fit this saw. I used a contrasting wood for the splines and milled them down to the perfect thickness. Splines should be a snug fit, not a tight fit, so they seat all the way down into the slots. Otherwise you can end up with gaps, which is not good. Oh shit. That's unbelievable. You just heard a massive flock of, I think they're Corellas. There's probably at least 200 in the flock, and every now and then they fly past, and that's the noise they make. It's pretty incredible to watch, actually. But I missed it today because I'm busy doing this. Once they had dried, I trimmed them with a flush cut saw, and then planed and sanded them smooth and flush. Next I started on the lid by resawing a couple of boards from this chunk of Camphor Laurel that was given to me by fellow maker Steve from That Pen Bloke. This wood had some amazing grain that had a 3D effect and was going to be an insert for the lid. I used two boards so I could book match the grain, making the layout of the insert symmetrical, and glued them into a single panel, matching up the grain as best I could. When that had dried, I ran it through the drum sander and trimmed it down to size, trying to cut off as little as possible. The insert was going to sit inside a mitered frame, which I made from a darker contrasting wood. I had this one old piece of a much darker wood and ran it through the usual processes to get it close to final dimensions. I then started building the frame by cutting the miters with my miter jig and then drilling holes for dowels using the dowel max. I continued to build the frame around the insert so I would get a perfect fit. To glue the frame together, I thought I could use these clamping blocks temporarily attached to the frame with masking tape and wood glue because I don't have any CA glue. But I soon find out this didn't work at all. I did manage to get that perfect fit though. Time to glue up the lid. This was already a stressful glue up because all the components were being glued at the same time, the 4 miters and the insert. And it was right here where the clamping block started to fail. So I went into panic mode and I felt like I was actually working this fast trying to rescue this glue up. The doweled miters were actually what saved this because I was able to put clamps directly across the length and width of the lid without the miters slipping out of alignment. I used the drum sander to clean up the lid and make it perfectly flat, which worked out great, but I was hesitant to use it because of the cross-grain sanding marks I knew it would leave on the end pieces. They can be difficult to sand out of hardwood, so I used a scraper and was pleasantly surprised how well that worked. I deliberately left the lid slightly oversized so I could cut it down to final size to fit the box. I then softened the top edge of the lid with a chamfer. I used the same chamfer bit to cut in a small finger notch for opening the lid. Our friend wanted her husband's name on the front of the box, so I loaded it into the laser enclosure and lowered the bed to its lowest position. And this was when I found out what the limitation of the enclosure is. The mounting bracket of the laser head was just scraping on the workpiece. No problem though, I just removed the honeycomb and that gave me the clearance I needed. To make sure I lasered the name in the correct position, I drew a rectangle in light burn the exact size of the box and then centered the text inside that rectangle. I then lined up the laser exactly to the bottom left corner because I was using the current position setting, and then checked the framing of the rectangle and the text to confirm everything was in the right position. All good to go. Fingers crossed. The finish for the box was beeswax, which leaves the wood feeling silky smooth and it's easy to apply. Just rub it in, leave it for a couple of hours and buff it off. To finish the box, I marked and cut out the pockets for some brass hinges, but due to my excitement of being so close to finishing, I forgot to record installing the hinges. I then added a ply base, lined on the inside with black felt, making sure not to use too much glue so there was no squeeze out on the inside of the box. I'm really pleased with how this box turned out and how the wax finish has brought that gorgeous grain to life. Thanks for watching.